This is the France 24 debate. We're looking at France, a country where the French way of doing business is meeting the problem of ever-rising unemployment. With us to talk about it, Mario Schelberg, the president of SGN Telecom, a small startup. Also with us, economist Agnès Michel of the French Green Party, and Mark Dean of the Bloomberg News Agency. Now, as we said at the outset, for the French, 3 million unemployed, which is what was announced just a few hours ago. It's a threshold that matters.
Lines at France's unemployment agency aren't growing any shorter. There are now officially 3 million unemployed in the country, the worst unemployment level since 1999. A situation the French Labour Minister blames on the previous government.
The 3 million unemployed face despair and great struggles. But the figure is the result of previous policies. They are the same 3 million unemployed we found when we took office, and it's one of the reasons why the French people decided to pick a new president.
The situation is unlikely to change in coming months, with major layoff plans at some of France's biggest companies like Peugeot or drug giant Sanofi.
There's almost 1 million more unemployed compared to early 2008, but this doesn't mean we've hit the peak. In fact, we're likely to see a rise in unemployment, and unfortunately the figures show that long-term unemployment is also rising.
To curb the trend, the French government has already announced a series of measures. 2,000 new advisors will join France's unemployment agency, and 100,000 new contracts for unqualified youths, as well as other subsidized contracts, will be created this fall. The government has also vowed to deal with the 250,000 positions that remain unfilled.
All right, you heard in that report the economist there saying how that figure should rise. Now, unlike the UK or Spain, France is not in recession. Growth for the year, though, expected to come in at a flat, I think it's 0.3% roughly for the year. Which is just about flat. And the writing's on the walls, you can see in that graph, Mark Dean. You look at the manufacturing index, which often is the forerunner of growth. That's the one in yellow. And it's heading south fast, it seems. So, Mark, how high will unemployment go?
Look, if you, in January 2005, just before the final tranche of the Hartz IV reforms were put through in Germany, which, essentially under Gerhard Schröder created an economic miracle over the coming 5 years, German unemployment rose to 12.5%. That's where it peaked in January 2005. I mean, we could well go there in France. The question is whether, in the meantime, the government will address some of the structural supply side issues that keep people from hiring in France and investing in France, so that we can have a French economic miracle 5 or 10 years from now.
All right, the French economic miracle 5-10 years from now. Some are not willing to wait. There's entrepreneurs in France who point the finger at a rigid labor market. A group of them have even started a website called Barrez-vous, Beat It. Tips on how to emigrate and start businesses abroad. Mario Schelberg, you were saying you're half German, half French. You decided not to beat it, and you decided that you'd start your company here. Why'd you do that?
Well, I did that first of all for a certain project, and second as well, I wanted to help my country because I don't think that barrez-vous means get away is not a solution. It's not going to help out our country and the future generation.
There's a bit of irony in
There's a bit of irony in there, obviously, but I think that the government should definitely see the potential that we have and that the youth have here, and give them the chance to build up companies that could employ more and more people in the future generation as well, or even older people who are who lost their jobs and looking desperately for a new job. And I think they definitely have a great potential.
You worked for a big drinks company. Now you're starting a telecommunications company. You've no employees yet. You're going to hire people. But you were telling me before we went on air that you're hesitating. So how many people do you expect to hire, and why are you having this hesitation? Why aren't you just hiring people?
Well, I would love to, but honestly, when you start a company, you're still pretty unstable depending on how much you invest in a company. In my case, it was I was pretty lucky because I don't need much investment, but obviously to hire people is a big cost for a company. Social contributions are really high.
Payroll taxes.
Payroll taxes. taxes in general are really high as well. If you don't see them coming, and if you're not like an economist, or if you don't deal with that pretty well, you have really bad surprises and your company can just go down in no time. So at the moment I'm working with consultants. Unfortunately, all the big companies do that as well. It is definitely, the most interesting way to do it at the beginning, or even later, as bigger companies do it all the time. But I would love to have my own employees pretty soon, to hire maybe 5 people for a start. But honestly, I can't deal with that for the moment. So I'm still building up by myself and working as hard as I can to make it happen.
All right, and yes, Michel, your reaction to that. What are your thoughts?
I really understand that. I think we have 2 issues. We have this fiscal issue in France, because we have this addition of small exceptions that are only targeted to, well, those who can afford a fiscal consulting. So it's really not something that you can afford, and so you have the heavy price of taxes in France. But what I hope from this government is to try to put down all the taxes and to make a fiscal revolution, as said Piketty, which was a very good idea. That's the first.
Every government that comes in promises tax harmonization, not just in France, by the way.
Yeah,
and somehow it never quite materializes.
But,
will this time be different?
Maybe the social situation will make that they won't have a choice. That would be, well, maybe some crises are opportunities. Maybe it's going to be this crisis that will be the opportunity to have this fiscal change. I hope so. I know it's not going to be right now, because they are actually talking about the budget this year and it's too late. But some works are about to be made, and I hope they're going to be in the right way. Well, hope is why we do politics, no? And the second thing is we are really pushing hard to have a better counseling in a local state.
Unemployment offices.
No, not really. Well, I'm not really personally convinced that it's the right place to do it, but I was talking more about the entrepreneurs. We have Oseo and stuff like that could be financing, but also helping out about counseling and fiscally, but with money too, because we know that the 2 first years of a firm are really complicated.
Go hand in hand. Marius Schilberg, your thoughts on that?
Well, my personal experience on that is actually pretty negative. I mean, in my own opinion, I tried to build it all up by myself, so I don't need to thank anyone after that. But obviously I needed help, and I went to look up for some help. I went to the different administrations in France, and unfortunately, I had 3 or 4 different helps that could come up, and nothing came up positive. So I had to rely on myself and to carry on by myself. So that didn't work out.
So Martine, just help us out here. Why is it that this is a country where the big blue chip companies make big profits? It's a company where the state functions well, good healthcare system, good infrastructures. What is it about France where the small companies, there seems to be a problem helping them out?
Yeah, no, there is genuinely a problem of financing of small companies in France. Well, I mean, different people will have different answers to that question. And, the socialist government answer is that, we need to build up this public investment bank, et cetera, et cetera. Well, that may be true. At the same time, they're taking away deposits and savings from the existing banks, and, which allows those banks to loan less as well. I'm not an absolute expert on that matter, but, I think it's tough anywhere when you're doing a startup to get financing.
Time as well, and you don't have that time when you
absolutely
build up
it's just the sheer administration of it. It's a lot of work. The government knows this is a problem. They don't quite know how to grapple with it. I mean,
the president said, "Give me 2 years."
Well, give me 2 years. It's a very broad sort of statement on the economy and competitiveness and so on and so forth. On the financing issue, we don't have Landesbank here. We don't have, business angels that, keep Silicon Valley running to the, it does exist, but it's just not the same culture. And, there's a lot of savings that go into, not particularly in productive investments. And, this government has just raised the ceiling on the Livre A, which is just going to go into social housing. Well, that's money that won't go into funding entrepreneurs, that's for sure.
Now, when the World Economic Forum surveyed French businesses, it found that France ranked 21st in terms of competitiveness. The top problem, and you can see the chart there, when in percentages there of the responses, the top problem, restrictive labor regulations, second, access to financing, then come the tax rates, tax regulations. So you see really that the restrictive labor regulations were considered the top problem. Mario Schellberg, is that a stereotype or is it really a problem? Is it like when you work at a big company, is it true that labor relations are really that restrictive?
Yes, they are pretty restrictive. I had this experience in this very big company. The company is doing great, actually. The stocks are doing great as well. Alcohol consumption is pretty stable. In the crisis, it's actually even going up. But unfortunately, they are dismissing a lot of people, older people that aren't too close to their retirement, or even, they get rid of them. And the young people only get those CDDs, which is on a short-term contract. If you do get a short-term contract, it's pretty good as you get a job, but you won't get any loan in the bank. You won't get anything, that gets you forward towards a stable life, and you don't know if you're going to keep your job either. So.
And yes, Michel making the point earlier that in Germany it's the same thing right now. There is a lower jobless rate, but the cost of those shorter reforms has been painful for a lot of people.
Yeah, indeed. Especially the bigger problem in that is that, the rules are probably not really well established. As you might get a short-term contract, you might be, if you're happy to get another one after, it's good, and then you might get another one, and then they might get rid of you anyway. So it is hard to believe that if you work as hard as you can, they will really hire you on the long term.
All right. Now, earlier, we heard the industry minister, the Minister for Productive Recovery, in a talk show. He called for a more flexible labor force Tuesday and lauded the German model when it came to part-time work, saying, by the same token, taking a swipe at the previous government of Nicolas Sarkozy, which subsidized instead overtime pay.
It's the German strategy that made him survive the crisis. When your turnover suffers an 80% plummet, the French reaction was to kick everybody out and close down firms, to lose the industrial know-how and the skills, to destroy and de-industrialize entire regions. The Germans decided to stick together. They invested 6 billion euros in part-time unemployment, while we were subsidizing overtime pay. They were saving while we were spending.
So do you agree with that, Agnès Michel?
I think that Arnaud Montebourg is just forgetting one thing: the constraints of the living in France and in Germany are not the same. The price of housing is not the same. And I'm not talking only about Paris, I'm talking about many regions in France. And we have a rigid society, and we want to put flexibility only on the workers. We should try to do that both ways. I completely understand what the entrepreneurs are saying about the need of making the employment more flexible in a way, the paperwork and stuff like that, and the way to negotiate the dismissal of some people. I mean, it's a necessity because some people are not adapted to that. But we have other way to to think, to consider this social issue, we can put money in retraining, which is very, very important at this time. I don't think that Arnaud Montebourg is taking into account this issue, which is, for me, the future, trying to identify the what we were saying before about the next industries, but making that people can do that. But if you only put the pressure on the employees and not in the economy in general, the government, as the regulation laws, and the same way the enterprises, it won't work.
Nonetheless, Marc Dean, you just heard a socialist minister and one who comes from the left wing of the Socialist Party saying the Germans are right, we have to have a more flexible workforce.
Well, I think Montebourg is saying that partly because of the experience he was talking about he saw in Germany, but also because it's the policy of the president. You know, François Hollande was on television 2 weeks ago and said that he wants an overhaul is maybe a strong word, but a renegotiated labor relations pact by Christmas, and that if the unions and business leaders can't agree, you know, he'll impose it. And what he was talking about that in there is very similar to what Montebourg was saying: increased flexibility for workers in return for, you know, essentially increased security of probably welfare payments or whatever. So, you know, the government hasn't spelled out specifically what it's talking about, but it's this sort of idea, which means that the idea, in fact, if you look at it, is to protect the jobs and not the workers. So that so that the industries that exist are maintained in the long term. So that, you know, when the world went into recession in 2008, 2009, after the collapse of Lehman Brothers, you know, the German companies could reduce their payroll costs without totally shutting down and without putting their workers at the door. Sorry, and that's a little bit what the French government wants to do here. I mean, I think the concern is that you know, it's things, as we were saying, things are very complicated already in France for hiring, for managing, you know, putting people in offices, and everyone's got to be, you know, X meters from a window and so on and so forth. There's a lot of complication here, and you know, it's the government's knee-jerk reaction is to always add on more complications. So I think, you know, to give the sort of Anglo-Saxon point of view, I think that would be part of the concern, but it's probably a step in the right direction.
Keep it simple in any case, is Marc Dean's advice. I want to thank you, Agnès Michel, Marc Dean. I also want to thank Maria Shelbrook for being with us, and thank you for joining us here in the France 24 debate.